1 second. Turn that off. All right, let's take 2. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Lusatter, and we are excited to have you here for another Parent Tech Academy. And joining me is Lindsay Staley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay.
And so just some housekeeping so you know how everything's going to work. We have the chat box where you're welcome to post questions. So yes, we will share, Joseph, we will be able to share the recorded session. So I have that recording right now, and I'll be posting to YouTube as soon as we're done with this. And then we also have a Q&A box, and this is super helpful because we can get a download of these questions, and I can kind of answer them live, and it's easier to track when questions are being asked. So if everybody could find that box in your Zoom controls, find Q&A and open that up, and then you can ask your questions along the way. As Lindsay is doing the teaching today, I'll be manning the Q&A session.
Great, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, of course.
Let's do this first, everyone. I see that we have maybe 15 people joining us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us on an afternoon in the middle of your work week as well. Would you guys please go into the chat feature and say your name and where your student goes to school in La Cañada?
Great idea, thank you. This really helps us tailor the experience so we know the age ranges and types of students to highlight. And just while you're doing that, some other news. Tonight we have a board meeting, and after we had 4 town halls last Thursday with the superintendent leading them specifically for our elementary staff, elementary parents, secondary parents and secondary staff. Our board meeting tonight will be a report out on those town halls, as well as presenting the overall distance learning and reopening school plan. So if you're interested, you can watch that live on our YouTube channel tonight. I'll post the link in the chat for you, and you can follow along on our progress. And I'll also share the website where we're kind of archiving everything. So we would love to have you join us for that tonight.
Great, thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us in the chat. I was going to say that I will spend more time on the elementary ideas more because the first people to chat with us were the elementary parents. But now I see that we run the gamut. So I'm glad that we are highlighting 12 of our most used apps all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. So I will briefly talk about every single one of them. But we will also, besides sending out the recording of this webinar, we will also be sending you our own slides, which have links to every single app that we are going over, running 1 or 2 minute tutorials, how your child can access them either on ClassLink or otherwise. So you will have everything that we talk about and then some. I will attempt to not talk this entire time. We will definitely have plenty of time at the end for all of your questions, whether they have to do with these apps or anything else tech related. But of course, I will also stop along the way to answer your questions as we go. So let's get started. Thanks, Jamie. So this training was born out of the very real distance learning. We realized that our teachers were already using over 70 apps, and that was very exciting for us in the technology department, but probably very daunting for families and children, and even some of our teachers. They feel the need to keep up with each other, and I know you as parents feel the need to keep up with the teachers. And so we wanted to make sure that you knew that we are all in this together. We are encouraging our teachers to send out tutorials to all of their students about any app that they ask their students to use before they ask their students to use it. And we're also attempting to implement a play phase so that our teachers will ask their students to play with any app before asking the students to use an app for the instruction that they are presenting. What I mean by that is one of the apps we'll go over is Padlet. Padlet is an online corkboard, and basically if I am the teacher and I ask a question of my students, running from how are you feeling today about distance learning all the way to, okay, guys, we've gone over thesis statements. If you had to turn one in right now, what would yours be? Post it. And each student would post their little digital Post-it note so that all 36 of my students could see each other's and work off of each other's ideas. Before I asked them about to post their thesis ideas, I could do something like, can you please post your best one-line knock-knock joke, so that they can simply practice using Padlet in a fun, low-stakes environment before I ask them to use it for part of our class. So in that vein, we are going to highlight 12 of our most used apps, both in elementary and high school, so that you will know what our teachers are asking your children to do with these apps. We've included tutorials, very short tutorials for every single one of them, so that you can feel smart the way we do when we find another app that we really like.
And I also want to highlight that after our session last week on ClassLink, one parent suggested maybe even prior to the play phase that would happen in school, students might be able to do that over the summer. So we are working on our tech checklist, kind of the readiness checklist, and we'll have some activities for students to kind of explore these apps even before school starts. So super great suggestion. And if you think of other things along the lines of that during today's session, please post them, because we are super excited to learn along with you.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Jamie, let's dive right in so we have time along the way to ask questions. The first one that I wanted to highlight is Flipgrid, which is usually used for our 7th through 12th grade students. And that is because it asks students to create a video response of themselves. And so most elementary teachers, not as many elementary teachers use Flipgrid as 7th through 12th grade teachers do. If I am a teacher and I ask students on the first day of school to tell me a little bit about who they are as a student, instead of creating a Google form where I simply ask them 5 or 10 questions about
the Q&A
their student preferences. Q&A? Sorry, I just heard a loud Q&A. We're good.
Sorry, my fault. We're back on track.
Wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Instead of simply typing out responses, I get to have each student create a 30-second, 45-second, 1.5-minute video of themselves answering my question. So students not only get to present themselves as people, but I also get to very literally hear their voice. And then of course, along the way, if I use it for instruction, I get to talk about presentation skills, revision skills, how speaking to an audience is very different than writing something for an audience. Our 7th through 12th grade teachers love Flipgrid. And I did include in this slide some of the Flipgrid lingo. It is more heavy on the lingo than most of our apps. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew that if a teacher or your child uses the word grid or topic, you knew what they were. A grid is not a question, it's like the whole class. So my grid would be Mrs. Staley's first period, Mrs. Staley's second period. The topic is the actual question I want the students to address in their video. Let me pause really quickly. I don't feel the need necessarily to pause after every single app, but because this is the very first one and I've already been talking for a little while, let me pause and see if anybody has any questions to ask.
And then, and as you're thinking about questions, yeah, please post them. I think this is a tool that we found the kids really love because they get to make videos of themselves, but there also are a lot of options in terms of privacy. We had one of our counselors at Palmcrest use this tool, and the students just recorded responses, but they weren't shared out to all the other students. So there are some really creative ways teachers can use this to get feedback and responses from kids, but it not have to be so public. So we know parents are always concerned about that kind of peer pressure factor. And sometimes that's a good thing and that's intended and part of the production. But there also is the other side of it that's pretty great.
Thank you for that, Jamie. All right, let's move on as I don't see any questions yet. Please post them as you come up with them, even if they have something to do with an app that we've already gone forward from. Edpuzzle is one of the easiest apps that our teachers use, and I'm pretty sure they use it 3rd through 12th grade. Edpuzzle takes a video. Let's say I have found a Khan Academy video that I think I can't do any better than. I take this Khan Academy video and I send it out to my students. But before the students watch the video, I get to choose points along the way of the video for the students to have to stop watching the video, whether they want to or not, and answer a question that I have crafted and put next to the video. The video will stop, they answer the question, or simply read my note. And as they answer the question and click submit, then the video continues playing. At the end of the video, it will actually auto score my students' answers if I have chosen so. And so I can get the feedback like A, how many of my students watched the video in its entirety, and B, who comprehended the video, or did they get what I wanted them to get out of it. You can use your own videos. Like if I created a screencast of my directions and I put it into Edpuzzle, I could ask questions about my own video as well. All right, let's go on to the third app, and then maybe I'll take some time for questions after this next one. Thanks, Jamie. Pear Deck is one of my favorite apps to use in the classroom, and I have taught everything 5th through 12th grade English in La Cañada, but I would use this primarily with my higher elementary students. I'm pretty sure 3rd through 6th grade teachers are primarily our top users, although I know several of our junior high, 7th and 8th grade teachers are starting to really love Pear Deck as well. We will talk about Google Slides more briefly, but Google Slides is Google's PowerPoint. And if I create a Google Slides presentation, either with information or I'm presenting them with my information, I want my students to take notes down below, Pear Deck takes my Google Slides presentation and adds engagement questions, not like Edpuzzle questions, like are they comprehending the material, but rather simply where are you on the scale of 1 to 10? Do you understand what's going on? Do you have questions? It forces teachers to take a moment and understand if the class is understanding and moving ahead with him or herself. So I have presented a few slides, and then I'm going to pause and I say, okay, students, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I can turn to my partner right now and teach my partner what is going on in class right now, or are you at a 1? I have no idea what's going on because I just came back from having the flu. I need you to start over at point A. Where are you on that scale with following along? And what's great is the teacher doesn't see the points anonymously, but the students do. So I don't have to stop my presentation. Everybody sees everybody's little circle go to where they are on that spectrum, but I am the only one that can see individually where each student is. So if a student sees, wow, yikes, one of our peers is on a level 1, they have no idea what's going on. It doesn't matter, and therefore they allow themselves to be truthful with how they understand the material. So Pear Deck offers those kinds of questions along the way of your presentation. So I will answer this question. Yes, it is a tutorial for you. You can't get the tutorials at this moment while we are presenting them, but this entire presentation will be sent out to you, so you will have access to every single link we have put in there, of course. Thanks for asking.
Yes, so what I'm going to do is we'll post it in the chat at the end of this session, but I'm also updating the Parent Tech Academy flyer that you have that has all of these sessions on there with our resources. So I'll post that again at the end also. So that's a live, the Google slide can be saved as a web page and stays live. So when we update that, you get live updates. So we'll make sure you have all of these resources at the end.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually why I chose to create this presentation in Google Slides, which is Google's PowerPoint, because there were so many links that we wanted you guys to have. It just it bogged down a document. And so whereas last week's training and our next training are simply on a document, this one had so much information that I wanted you to have after a presentation that Slides was a better fit. Okay, so Padlet is what I referenced earlier, where it was the online corkboard. I ask a question, students choose their own little digital Post-it note, and they post their note. I can put it in moderation form so that only I can see what each student is posting before it goes out live for the rest of the class to see, just to make sure students are all keeping everything school appropriate and not being too silly with their answers. But it can also be anonymous. So if you simply want to gauge students' interest or understanding, you don't have to put it in moderation form, and you can just have the students post how they are feeling about an assignment or a specific day. You can also make it, teachers can also make Padlet live for the world to answer. And so you might actually see a teacher post a Padlet, or actually Jamie has even posted Padlets for our community, so that everybody can answer certain questions in a corkboard form.
Yeah, and I love Padlet. I've been a fan of this for a long time because it lets students get those initial ideas out. So that's how I've used it in the classroom. And it's just, okay, tell me what you're thinking about this. And I can quickly get a check for understanding from every single student at once. So I always loved it as a way to really know what every student is thinking. And then the bonus of that was if somebody was struggling or didn't have an idea, they had a peer to look at. And it was almost like sanctioned copying in a sense. And not that they would copy the ideas, but it gave them a spark to get started. So anybody who was struggling or who didn't have an idea, they could build on it. And then the kids who just like to, say a whole lot, they have an open space to do that. So we'd see varying things, like one student would almost write an entire essay on a question where another had a couple sentences. But for me as a teacher, I would get a really good look into what they were knowing and understanding. And then it allowed the conversation to move on to deeper topics. So we can see this one being used extensively during any kind of learning environment that we have coming up this fall, because it just would really give teachers access to everyone at the same time, which is hard to do both in person and virtually. So it's a really good tool.
Jamie and I both come at teaching from an English language arts lens, because that is our primary love in the classroom. And so students of all ages facing that proverbial blank page and having to all of a sudden come up with their own thesis, their own essay, Padlet in its cute corkboard form helps students face something all together as a group before they have to face it alone as a student. I assume that most people joining us today have already had the experience of Screencastify since March, since we had to start distance learning. Screencastify is the easiest way for our students and teachers to create a screencast. There are myriad apps out there where they can create a screencast, but we love and ask students and teachers to use Screencastify primarily because it's so easy to use on Chromebooks. Nobody needs a fancier device than a Chromebook to create a screencast. If I am a teacher and we're doing distance learning and I need my students to understand my material, but they're craving interaction with me, I can either post my mugshot in the corner and speak over my written directions, or if I have a class that thinks it's distracting to see my face, I can take away the video and they just hear my voice over the directions. And therefore, it's very much like Khan Academy videos where you hear somebody and you see their hand possibly writing the math equations, but they don't necessarily see a face. You can do both with Screencastify. It's simple, and everybody in La Cañada right now has a premium version of it, so they can use it anytime they want to. Let's pause for a second and see if there are any other questions. Thank you, Noelle. Screencastify, I primarily work with the 7th through 12th grade teachers, sometimes the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers, but any student can use Screencastify, especially because you can turn on and off the video recording option. And so any students of any ages can use this. You will definitely see the teachers of all grades use this fall, regardless of how we come back to school.
And this is something that you may see the teachers using and also assigning the students to use. Sorry if I didn't hear you say that, but sometimes the kids are asked to create their own Screencastify. And that's why we think it's important for you guys to know that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So if you have been introduced to Kahoot already, you can probably hear the Kahoot music in your head and it can stick with you for days. Kahoot is one of those apps that came on the market several years ago, and everybody, teachers and students of all ages, went gaga for it. People are still gaga for Kahoot. I want to reiterate that Kahoot, though it's a game and can be used for review and for learning, I don't know of any teacher that uses an in-class Kahoot game for grading purposes. It is best for review. We have 10 minutes before the end of class, and tomorrow you guys have a test that you have known for weeks is coming up. I'm gonna start throwing questions at you guys, and it's loud, it's fast. Kids are racing against the clock and each other, and after every single question, students see a leaderboard and how well each student is doing, which is why it's best for quick review rather than grades. They can have nicknames, and the whole point of a Kahoot is to answer quickly, which is not what we endorse when actually assessing students. So Kahoot is fun, and most teachers I know of all grades use it, but not for assessment purposes, rather for review. There is now a home Kahoot version. It's called Kahoot Homework, but I still know very few teachers who have ever used it for an assessment purpose.
And I think it would be a good time, as we're about to go to number 7, to let parents know and our watchers know that Lindsay's primary role is training teachers on making kind of the choices to use for these tools. And I think you're hearing some of her rationale as she explains them. And we really try to help teachers decide what is it that they're trying to accomplish, and then what tech tool will solve it. And so just know that we're really mindful about what's the best fit for the classrooms and for the students and the teachers.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jamie. It's really ironic that I was put into this position 5 or 6 years ago now to push teachers to expand their knowledge, to try new things, to get used to moving to the Google Suite. And slowly, as everybody became knowledgeable in all of the things that we wanted them to be knowledgeable in, I've slowly started to push them to do the opposite. Don't use a tech tool simply for the sake of doing technology. Be very mindful and purposeful in why you use a specific app or ask the students to do anything with a device. And so that has become such a focus of ours in the last few months, where everything that we've asked the students to do has to have something to do with the device, because that's what we've got right now to interact with each other. That's the only option for students to be able to connect with their teacher right now. And so we are looking very forward to the day where all school is 100% back to normal. But until it is, we are still asking teachers to be very mindful of how and when they use any technology tool.
And so Jennifer just had a good question as we're getting ready to move on about where you can find all the apps. So we are in the process of rolling over all of our data, as I mentioned in our last session. And so we'll be cleaning up ClassLink, putting it in the right ones for the right grade levels. And some of these are just web links that the teachers give, and the kids just go directly to our URL. And we can also add those into ClassLink. So I think that's a really good note, because we hadn't really added Kahoot or links to Screencastify. And I think that's an awesome suggestion. Because again, they're just websites versus apps, but we can funnel those in. So thank you for that idea, Jennifer. We will get them in ClassLink for you. But in terms of app downloads, they are just websites. So the ones we're sharing so far aside from Screencastify is an extension. So I think what we could do to kind of clarify is we're going to share our list of all apps with you, and then we have it says where they are and where you can find them. And we might be able to clarify whether it's an app extension or a website, so I can add that in there. So thank you for that question. That's awesome. And then we had another one about technology, which I'm going to answer in the chat. So that question is coming up to one of our attendees who asked that, and I'll let Lindsay continue.
Great, thank you. Yes, it is about Chromebooks and obtaining devices and which devices, and we will actually go over that before we leave you, don't worry. Mm-hmm. Quizzes is much newer than Kahoot, and it is not as flashy or loud. I have seen this primarily used in 7th through 12th grade classes because it's not as flashy, and it's a little bit more of a serious app that asks students to answer questions that the teacher puts on there for them. They can put it on, they can give it out to the students using Google Classroom, but then the teacher can go into the Quizzes app and see all the information for each student about how they did on the small quiz that they are giving the students for homework. Quizlet is amazing. Quizlet has been around for a while, and both Jamie and I can attest to how wonderful Quizlet is because we've both used it in our own lives, not even as teachers, but just in our own learning endeavors. Quizlet is not a test creator. It is simply an online flashcard maker. So if I am studying to become an administrator and I have a ton of lingo to memorize before I can move on to more important essays, I will go on to Quizlet and I will simply enter in every single word or phrase that might come up in my studying, and it makes those digital flashcards for me. And then it has ways for me to study those flashcards that we all want our children to use anyway. As a teacher, I would not just encourage my students to create Quizlets so that they can quiz themselves using flashcards. I would say something like, guys, here's a list of 10 vocab words that you are going to come across this chapter. Instead of asking them to go through the textbook and just write down the definition, as I used to do 15 years ago in the classroom, I would say, here are the definitions. Don't waste your time looking them up. You've got them now. Now go on to Quizlet and make a Quizlet for each other of the definitions or a sentence using the word or the scenario, the context in which it comes in the textbook. And then you can share them with each other. If I have a colleague who is also studying for the same administrative exams, I can share my whole quiz deck. Or if I'm a student in the classroom, guys, I've got this one. I can do chapter 1, so everybody has it, and another person can do chapter 2.
All right, so for Seesaw, do you want me to take this one?
Please.
Yeah, so Seesaw we saw grow out of kind of teacher-directed use the last couple of years. A few of our kinder teachers found it and just really spread the positivity of it. And it really gave a window into the classroom for all parents to see student work and activity. And I think the kids really enjoyed posting. So if you have a primary kid, I'm sure you've seen Seesaw. So it's mostly, again, the younger students. And it just reminds me of kind of, you know, like a portfolio. It's almost like a little mini Facebook for the classroom. And it just lets the kids produce content and share it with their families. So a really good tool. We're looking at kind of how it's going to be standardized for our primary classroom. So if this is the way that content and work is delivered, that's one of our ideas, just as a way to pivot. So kind of know that our plans are standing as of right now that we want, we'll have some on-campus instruction for our elementary kids, and some kids may choose to be at home, but we do have that idea that it could pivot at any moment. Even as we speak, things are, rapidly changing around us in terms of what's happening in Los Angeles County. So we're preparing for kind of all contingencies, and Seesaw, whether in person or hybrid or full distance learning, is a really good tool for our primary students.
I was speaking with a teacher just yesterday, an elementary teacher, and she said she is both a La Cañada parent and a teacher in our district. And she said, It was so wonderful for my second grader to be able to express herself in a Seesaw project, and then not only turn that in digitally to the teacher on Seesaw, but also be able to see her entire class's projects at the same time. And I could also see everybody's projects because the teacher opened it up. The teacher does not open up every single project for all parents to see, but for that individual project where the students were expressing themselves almost like a digital open house, she said it was wonderful for everybody and really brought the class together. So you will definitely see this in lieu of Google Classroom if you have a primary student.
And then another specific elementary app, sorry, Lindsay, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, please.
Another primary elementary one is BrainPop. And, you know, we have this accessible to students via ClassLink. And a lot of times teachers assign this as support for content that they're teaching, which is pretty exciting. And the kids tend to get really engaged with the short videos and the lessons.
When I was teaching 5th and 6th grade at Palm Crest, I used BrainPop often with history. I love American history and I loved teaching it to my 5th graders, but 6th grade world ancient history was a bit of a stretch for me. And so I relied on the 3-minute BrainPop videos often to help me get across to 11-year-olds the initial idea of democracy. The decision to go into city-states in ancient Greece. And I think my 6th graders had grown up exposed to BrainPop videos for the last 5 or 6 years, and it didn't matter. Every single time I would put one on, they would cheer. They love them. They get the humor. They giggle at them. They never mind the follow-up writing prompts or even the quizzes, the 3 or 4 question quizzes that I would give them pertaining to the small videos. If you've never seen one, they're kind of hilarious, very much like Disney movies, you know, always have jokes for the parents as well. BrainPop has 2 characters, a teenage boy looking character and a robot. Go with it, it works, and it makes the students giggle and learn at the same time. I'm a huge advocate of BrainPop.
I really like they even put out a COVID-19 BrainPop kind of explaining the virus to kids. And I thought, you know, that was that was featured in some of our early communication for families as a resource. I thought it was pretty good.
Yep, great. IXL is predominantly K-6, but I do know that some of our 7th and 8th grade teachers also use IXL, especially for our special ed students. IXL has actually been around, I think, since like 1999 or something like that. It's one of the oldest apps that's been in existence for individualized lessons. A teacher will populate their class into the IXL program, and then each student gets a diagnostic test. They take the diagnostic test on the standard that they're supposed to be learning in that class or maybe last year's class. And then it shows the teacher exactly where each student is along the content standard mastery spectrum and gives out the next lesson for every single individual student. They do have English language arts program as well, but I think at least in 7, 8, most teachers use it for math.
And this is one of those tools that is available during the summer for kids to use via ClassLink. So this one is always open. So kids can use it whether they're being assigned material in class or on their own, and really work through some of the standards that they're needing reinforcement on. So good tool. DreamBox is another math software that we added in recent years. And this one, the teachers seem to really have good feedback from when they were using it with their kids. And so just another option for math, a different format than IXL, but again, just reinforcing the same ideas. So this one is also available in ClassLink for our K through 6th grade students, and open during the summer. So kids can work on their DreamBox accounts now.
Okay, so let's pause for just a second before we go on to the digital textbooks. And I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions. We've attempted to go super fast over those 12 specific apps. And like we said before, there's 60 more of them. And I don't want to make you think that you are going to encounter all 75 of these apps anytime this next school year, but you might encounter 5 or 6 of them. So ask any questions that you may have, or worries, concerns, after hearing us talk about these 12.
And there was a question about Prodigy, and I don't have as much experience with that, but I know our LCE teachers and maybe some of our Paradise Canyon teachers are using it, and the kids seem to love it because it's game-based. So I mean, I haven't vetted it personally, but I know the teachers really enjoy it, and the kids have a lot of fun with it. I did hear, you know, one kid was going, like, spending a little bit too much time, but I mean, too much time playing math games, I don't know. I think that's okay.
Things could be worse.
Yeah. And then I had another question, but I lost it. It was something that somebody said, and then it sparked an idea. So hopefully it comes back. So we'll keep moving on. All right, so digital textbooks. This is something I mentioned last week with our ClassLink lesson, but just to remind you, and so that you have a visual of what you'll see in ClassLink. Got it back, Kinder parents, thank you. That's what I needed. I needed the ClassLink spark. So our Kinder parents that are on today, summer school for us, our Ed Foundation summer school ends this week, and then we can start our formal data rollover process once we get those grades finalized and transcripts settled. So we're doing all the prep now, and then next week when you do the rollovers, that's when we'll be creating all the accounts for the new students. So Kinder families, I will email you directly with specific directions and probably a tutorial of how to launch ClassLink at home, because we want you to get a little bit of time this summer to prep and practice with it. So we'll probably do a small session just for our brand new kinders to maybe give you a tour and let them practice, because it is a big leap, like learning their username and logging into ClassLink. Like it's a lot for them to do. So we'll dedicate a special session just for that once we get the accounts created and everything rolled over. That way they get some time this summer to play with the tech tools. So know that that's coming. So on the topic of digital textbooks, we have about 5 now. There might be one that I missed as I was putting this together, but these are the big 5 that we have that kind of span K-12. So you're familiar with the icons. The first one is the National Geographic box, and that's Nat Geo. So that is for our Kinder English Language Arts. And I have to confirm, but I think their science is also going to be Nat Geo. But I haven't heard if that was, I can't remember if that was formally adopted or not. So I'll update that once I know. And then Think Central is the blue one, and that's ELA for our 1st through 5th grade students. And then the red McGraw-Hill, this one is used, there's tons of textbooks that are linked with this publisher. The big one for elementary is K-5 Math is in McGraw-Hill. But then we also have our, I'm sorry, there's a typo there, I'll fix it. The My HRW, LCHS Math 1, 3, and 4 are also with the red app. So I'll fix that typo, sorry about that. And then the My HRW, that's for our 6th grade English, as well as our 6th through 8th grade math. So our kind of middle school-ish age kids really spend a lot of time with that app. And then the last one we have is Vista Higher Learning, and that's our online textbooks for our world languages. And I believe we have French and French and Spanish in there, and I think German, but I have to confirm on that. So those are the kind of the big apps you'll see for textbooks. And as I mentioned, any new textbook adoption, we ensure that we have ClassLink connections so kids have access to both the digital and the physical textbooks. All right.
So the next thing I want to do is not go over app by app every single thing that we use within Google. If you don't know, we are a Google district, which means instead of, say, the Microsoft suite of Word and PowerPoint, we use Google Docs and Google Slides. But I wanted to put each app on its own slide in this presentation, knowing that it would be sent out to all of you. So if you are super versed in the Microsoft suite, but your 3rd grader is now being asked to create their own poster in Google Slides, you can have our 2-minute tutorial about where things are in slides, how to share them with the teacher so that you are not lost and feeling like a newbie when you actually know exactly what you're doing. And so each slide that follows this one is about each app that we ask our students to use, primarily 3rd through 12th grade, Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Forms, which is the survey creator, but now a teacher can, instead of making a survey for the students, they can create a quiz out of a Google form, and it can even auto-correct those quizzes from the students if they are questions that are able to be auto-graded. Obviously, if it's a writing question that a teacher needs to grade, then it won't be auto-scored. But I did want you to have our very short tutorials and a little bit of information about each app in the name of being on the same page and helping each other out. Google Classroom, however, I'd like to pause and make sure that you know Google Classroom is its own beast. Not because it is hard. It is intuitive. It was created, I would say, 4.5 years ago. I was already in this position and out of the classroom when Google Classroom was created. So it's not that old, but Google has made has attempted to make Google Classroom remain simple and intuitive. And so they haven't changed much in the last 4.5 years. But that being said, most of your teachers will ask your students to be part of a Google Classroom, receive information from the teachers through Google Classroom, and also turn in almost all of their assignments exclusively through Google Classroom. So because of that, I have posted not one link, but 3 on this slide. And we are doing our entire 1-hour conference in a few weeks solely about what a parent needs to know about Google Classroom. Your students will learn about Google Classroom through their teachers and through our tutorials. You don't have to worry about that. But we want you to know what it looks like from the teacher side, what they expect your children to be able to do with Google Classroom, and also how you are going to interact with it through the Guardian summaries. So let's pause there really quickly because I will gloss over the other apps in the Google Suite, but I will pause here to see if you guys have any initial questions about Google Classroom and how it is used in 3rd through 12th grade.
And while you're thinking, we also want to make some adjustments with how it was used. We got some really, constructive feedback from parents and students about Google Classroom during distance learning. And things like how many times a day a teacher posts and the timing that posts happen to how things are organized. So we have a lot of tips for our teachers to help make it super effective for the students as well, because we know it's a valuable tool, and kind of, building some common practices around it, I think will help everybody understand what's going on. So we want to make sure it stays super powerful for everyone.
As I don't see any questions, let's move on. The only thing that I want you to know about Google Drive outside of our tutorial is simply that you don't have to convert documents to a Google Doc or slide in order to house it within Google Drive. It can keep PDFs, even movies that you create or download, PowerPoints. It can remain in its original format. Google Drive is simply the house that keeps it in the cloud. And we are also creating student tutorials for our younger students, meaning 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, to make sure they know how to get something. Maybe they create a screencast onto their Google Drive in order to upload it to Google Classroom for their teachers. If that whole sentence freaks you out a little bit, don't worry, we've got you covered. We will have a tutorial coming your way soon.
One idea I just thought of for our students in terms of summer work is they can clean up their Google Drives. So we used to, I think actually our colleague David Pasquez might do this. We would go to our elementary classes and have them move all of their last year's work into an archive folder. So that's something, again, Google search is built in, so not required, but you can consider Google Drive the new binder. And teaching kids kind of digital organization, I think, is a super important skill. So that could be, if you're building a weekly schedule, 10 minutes of cleaning your Google Drive sounds like, you know, cleaning the new cleaning your bedroom. So consider that as something, but you know, they need training on it. It's not as easy as just go clean your room, right? You've got to show them, like, create an archive folder, throw everything in from last year in there, things like that. So we could perhaps work on a tutorial to send to students, but that would be a good summer chore.
It is actually a lesson that I do with the 7th and 8th grade students. And so I have it written down in a document for my colleagues to follow. I'm just going to put that tutorial or that substitute lesson, for lack of a better word, on this on this slides presentation so that you can have access to it too. So read it like a substitute teacher and make your kids do it.
Let's add it to our student tech checklist also. That'll be some of their summer work. Great.
Google Docs looks like the Microsoft Word of 1997. It is easy and intuitive, but the only thing you need to know is that there's no save button. And why Google Docs is awesome is the collaboration feature, the share feature. And if you want to know more, our tutorial is all you need.
And watch the 30-second video. It is so fun.
It is old school for Google, and it will immediately make you a convert. I am of the camp that anything our teachers want our students to create, it can be done in Google Slides. I say this as a 12th grade English teacher. I want my students to create an essay, do it in Google Slides instead of document. I want my students to create a meme or an infographic or follow along my presentation and take their own notes, create your own adventure, write a story for younger students, a PowerPoint to go out into the real world and present to a community. Do it in Google Slides. Our teachers use Google Slides probably more than anything outside of Google Classroom. It is easy, and again, there's no save button. The collaboration is where it's at. And encourage your children to just press buttons. They will not lose any work because of the autosave feature, and they're certainly not going to break Google. The Google Docs tutorial will be on the Google Docs slide that we will send out with this recording. Google Forms I've already talked about, which is the survey creator that some of our teachers also use for a quiz creator. Okay, and the very last thing that I wanted to share with you before I finally stop talking for good and ask if you have more questions for us is our Ed Tech Glossary. Now, we purposefully made this simple. I think there's only 20 or so terms in the glossary right now. I'm sure we've missed a few, and as soon as it comes out of our mouth in a meeting, we will add it to the document. But we didn't want to muck it up with 100 tech terms. We just wanted to take the 20 or 30 phrases that we use most often in our own classrooms with our own teachers, and thus the teachers using with the students, with your children, and make sure you know what they're talking about. Things like blended learning and flipped classrooms, which all of our teachers are doing right now because of distance learning, PBL and other acronyms like project-based learning, to a few IT terms like an extension versus an app. If we mention the Screencastify extension and we tell you that it's really easy to get the extension, but you don't quite know what an extension is, we want to make sure to remedy that and make your life easier, not harder. So when you receive this slides presentation, you have access to the glossary as well, and we'll put it on our website too. So with that, let me pause and check if there's any questions before we, Jamie, why don't you go ahead and talk about equity devices and hotspots, and then we'll ask for your questions.
Perfect. So, you know, as we're watching the landscape and just how fast things have accelerated with technology, we've really come to realize that no matter how we're handling learning for next year, kids do need a device at home. because there's just been this tremendous growth in what the teachers can do and see with the kids in terms of possibility, as well as just being ready. If we have to shut down, we need to make sure there are no missed steps. So we're recommending that all of our kinder through 12th grade families have a device for their students. So the breakdown would be, if you have a 4th through 12th grade student, we would definitely recommend them having their own Chromebook so that they can bring it to school and be ready for anything. And we've typically been at 5th through 12th grade, but we really think the 4th graders are super ready. The teachers were actually emailing me and saying, please, can we get our 4th grade students on this program? And we've had them in the classroom for the kids to use, but we really want to get away from shared devices right now. And again, we could assign one device to the student in the classroom, but we just want to keep everything super clean. So we're saying 4th through 12th grade should really bring a device to school and a Chromebook. And so we have a link here for you with a buying guide, things to look at, specs, and all of that. And then if you have a K through 3rd grade student, ideally them having a dedicated device at home that they could use is what's needed. So if you have a Chromebook, awesome. If you want to get one, that's great. If you need to borrow one, we can help you. There was a question about iPads for kinders. I think those are totally fine for what the kinders are going to be doing. The Chromebook is a little tricky at that age because they have to type in their username, and that can be challenging, versus on the iPad, the kinders can have their quick card with ClassLink, and it's just a QR that they kind of scan and it logs them in. So I think, Chromebook or iPad is fine for the kinder. If you already have a device, that's great. If they have a computer that they can use, also fine. You don't need to rush out and buy something. Just really consider that they have something that they can use, that it's not a shared device that maybe you're competing with their time while you're at work. Again, because we saw more shutdowns happen yesterday. So just be ready for kind of that device crunch that could happen. And then if you do have, I'm going to talk about this at the board meeting tonight and also send out a special email, but if you've had any internet outages or trouble with Spectrum, I had a meeting with them yesterday, and we can actually get something done in terms of more support sent to our city, but they really need all of those outages to be logged. So if you have just in the past gone on Facebook and said, hey, is there an outage? And your internet's down, start putting in those supports, start calling them and log it, because what they discovered is that there was just an overconsumption of bandwidth and the city didn't have enough of the infrastructure, but they can fix that. We just have to report every single outage. So more on that to come in an email and in the board meeting tonight. But again, back to devices, have a Chromebook for your K through 12th grade student is amazing. But again, if it's K3 and you already have something at home, don't rush out and buy anything. Just make sure they have something they can use. And like I said, we can help you with an equity device. So if you're unable to purchase something, I know finances are kind of all over the place for everyone. So we want to be sensitive to that. If a couple $100 or, is not doable right now, we have a link for you that you can request a device.
Before we say goodbye, I want to make sure that you guys have access to help.lcusd.net. That is where you can go at any time and put in a tech request. And by tech request, I mean, my student's Chromebook finally died after 3.5 years. Can you please help me figure out a new one to get? All the way to, I need help, my student can't access this app that he's supposed to have access to. Anything within the technology and educational landscape, we've got you covered. I also wrote down our personal, LC emails, and you can email either of us anytime you have questions, and we will get you hooked up with the correct answers and people if we are not it. So let me take more of your questions. And of course, it doesn't have to be about apps. We can take your questions about anything at all. Thank you for joining us. We're really happy you're here.
So for the question about the equity device, it's available for anyone. So typically the deal I made with a community when we launched Chromebooks about 5 years ago is that if we could keep it at about a 70% families buy, 30% districts buy, then we can keep the budget going. And we've typically run at a 12 to 11%, 11 to 12% equity device every year in terms of kids checking them out. So we are totally fine there. So if you need one, I'll be sharing the link out in communications this week, specifically about how to borrow a device. And then the question about buying another computer. It's just a matter of sending the Chromebook for the in-person school part. So if you, for example, are staying on the distance learning track for this year, and you have a computer that your fifth grader can use, totally fine. We just say coming to school, they need to have a Chromebook because it works with getting on our Wi-Fi and getting all the tools and everything that they need. We manage them and it's super compatible. So that makes it much easier. But again, using that at home wouldn't be a problem. We definitely don't want you to have to buy something new if you don't need it. Question about Google Classroom. Okay, so that's awesome. We did have some second graders use Google Classroom this year. I think all of the second grade team at Palmcrest used it. So it's definitely an option. We just saw the teachers gravitating more towards Seesaw, but we are encouraging that use at the younger grade levels as well. And something that we were able to fix, we can auto enroll the students so the kids don't have to join with a class code. So we'll be able to make sure that's a little more seamless this next year, because we know some of the younger students had trouble with the class code and getting into the class. And thank you for the question about sharing the laptops on campus. So what we are planning on doing is kind of assigning them for a block of time and then doing a cleaning before they would go to the next group. So we have cleaning supplies ready to go for our devices that we use when we're bringing them in for repairs or things like that. So I've talked with a couple teachers about the shared devices, and rather than them being shared by day, sometimes they would wheel the cart over during the same day. We might do something like a couple days with one class, then we have time to clean before they go to the next class. So we're working on that, those exact logistics now. Oh yeah, thank you for the email cleaning question. That would be, yes, we will add that to the checklist. That's awesome. They should actually just archive. Thank you. We will put that on the summer student checklist that we're going to launch soon and make sure there's a guide for that. That is an awesome idea. And also that they know that they have email. We'll do a little, make sure that they check that as well.
Yeah, maybe checklist number one, they should read their email first and then archive.
And we also have a tutorial on Google Classroom notifications and how to set those correctly, because that's what, if you open up your younger students' emails, it's all Google Classroom notifications. So we will include that as well that they can look at.
Before you all leave us, I want to make sure you know that we are going to take a couple weeks off from these parent trainings, but we still have 2 more topics, and we will do one the first week of August, I believe 4th and 6th, twice, which will be more tips and how to best help your child learning at home if and when we need to go to distance learning in the fall. Obviously right now 7th through 12th grade will be at least a little bit distance learning, and as things change every day, we don't know about elementary, but we have plenty of ideas that are tangible. You can begin creating them even before school begins. So that's the first week of August, and then the week before school begins, I believe that's August 11th and 13th, we will be highlighting Google Classroom for a whole hour. Thank you, Jamie, for those links.
Yes.
Great.
And then Jennifer, thanks for your question. We are gonna, I'm halfway through getting it built is our kind of checklist. And I think having the kids play with them now is awesome. Just have a conversation and just see which ones they are familiar with and which ones they aren't, and let them look through them. You can even show them the 1-minute tutorials that Lindsay has for you on the slide deck, and let your kids take a look at them. I think that'd be awesome. As much exposure as you can do now would be great. You could even do things together.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jamie. Say that again.
Nope. I was going to say, even just do something together. You're going to, play on a Google Doc together, or any of those things. Test out Screencastify together.
Google Docs and Google Slides, let them create a drawing or a picture or a poster, even a card that you can print out. Anything that you can get them used to clicking the buttons in Docs and Slides would go a long way.
All right,
Jamie and
we
I
are
will stay
almost at it.
on
Yeah.
for several more minutes to answer any questions off or on topic that you may have. But you guys, it's 2 p.m. And so I thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay well, and thanks for joining us. Hopefully see you in a couple weeks.